Welcome, ma'am, again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you start now? Okay.
Yes.
So, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to all to this World Human Sciences and Management Conference 2021. This is Rudra Narayan Das, Executive Director, Center for ADIVASI Research and Development. We are proud to announce that this conference is conducted along with Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, and Ravenshaw University, Cuttack. I welcome our speaker for today, Professor Chiara Bottici, and participants across the globe through Facebook and YouTube Live, and who are here to listen. Professor Chiara. The broader theme of this conference is agnotological context, disciplinary practices of social sciences, and policy preference. On behalf of Center for ADIVASI Research and Development, I extend my profound gratitude to Professor Dr. Sanjay Kumar Nayak, Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Dr. Mahadev Jaiswal, Director, Indian Institute of Management, Professor Sharad Kumar Palita, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha. The convener of this largest virtual conference are eminent Indian historian, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, and eminent policy activist, writer, and philanthropist, Mr. Charudat Panigrahiji. Ladies and gentlemen, the main outcome of this conference is to come up with the national and international framework for the education system in future. The crux of this conference will be the use of digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality that is being increasingly adopted after the outbreak of COVID-19. We hope this conference would help students, faculties, researchers, and all to expand their mental horizon to help the education system to adopt the best in future. Dear friends, the Center for ADIVASI Research and Development is a leading research-oriented institution promoting ethnographic, empirical, and evidence-based research for engaging and addressing the challenges that 21st century globe is facing today. The prime agenda of this institution to come up with potential policy solutions for social change while believing in the idea of debate, dialogue, discussion, expertise, experiencing, and education. The institution focuses on marginalized communities and work for their livelihood to protect the nature, culture, language, and identity in particular. The age of modernity has witnessed that change is the only constant phenomenon for societal purpose to enhance knowledge. Our information work for them is methodical and avoid paradoxical frameworks which neglected so many centuries from theory to become practices. The center sincerely believes in the concept of social marketing, which is seriously looking for non-profit marketing and builds new social entrepreneurship for check and balance mechanism to glorify generations to come. The center the Center for ADIVASI Research and Development come to solve with the holistic approach of critical thinking in education to fill the gaps and plan accordingly for the voiceless communities. Dear friends, in today's evening, we have with us one of the very mesmerizing personality of the 21st century, a very important philosopher of United States and the entire globe, is none other than Professor Chiara Bottici. Professor Chiara is an Associate Professor of Philosophy and Director of Gender Studies at the New School of Social Research and Eugene Lang College, New York. Professor Bottici studied philosophy at the University of Florence, then obtained a PhD from the European University Institute in 2004. After a postdoctoral at the SUM, under the guidance of Roberto Esposito, she taught at the University of Frankfurt, subsequently joining the faculty of the New School for Social Research, where she has been teaching since 2010. Professor Chiara is known for her work on how images and imagination affect politics and her feminist experimental writings. Her work has explored the role that images and imagination play in politics. She is the author of 6 books, and including A Philosophy of Political Myth, Cambridge University Press in the year of 2007, Imaginal Politics, Columbia University Press in 2014, and Porti Miti Forse Quattro in 2016, which addressed the history of philosophy, critical theory, psychoanalysis, and feminism. With Jacob Blumenfeld and Simon Critchley, she also edited The Anarchist Storm in Pluto Press in 2013. Professor Bottici's philosophical work is devoted to exploring the politics of imagination in its different aspects, from general theory about the role of images in politics to more specific inquiries into sexism, heteronormativity, and Eurocentrism, Islamophobia, racism, and coloniality of power. So welcome Professor Chiara to World Human Sciences and Management Conference. So without taking much time, I would like to invite you to talk about your topic, Anarcho Feminism. So please, Professor Bottici, to talk about Anarcho Feminism. The floor is yours. Please welcome.
Thank you so much for the introduction and the kind invitation. I would like to begin by recognizing that I'm currently living in the United States of America, also known with the indigenous name of Turtle Island. And today I'm speaking from New York City, which sits on the unseized land of the Lenni Lenape people, whose struggle and persistence in this territory, the revindication of the land, I would like to acknowledge and express my solidarity with. So the topic of my talk is Anarcho Feminism. We live in a global political system characterized by what I propose calling menocracy. What does this concept tell us? It tells us that in some contexts, patriarchy is declining. Men are no longer the single head of the family, but they still remain the first sex. Whereas patriarchy literally means the rule of the male head of the family and has been toppled in many contexts, so much so that some have spoken of a fatherless society. The concept of menocracy points to the power that men still exercises over the other sexes and genders everywhere. Thus, menocracy can thrive even in contexts when patriarchy is declining. And my major claim is that it is thriving now globally. Particularly if we take the globe as our framework, it is evident that women, Two-Spirit, and LGBTQ+ people are still oppressed all over the world. No matter which sources of oppression which we focus on, race, class, gender, empire, ecology, the second sex is always at the bottom. I use here the expression second sex, borrowing from the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, to include all those who are excluded from the first sex. So by second sex, I mean women, but also LGBTQ+, Two-Spirit, and third gender. The term Two-Spirit is a term that I borrow from Native American activists who have coined this term as an umbrella term to denote what in the different tribes of living in Turtle Island were meant to be subjectivities that did not fit the simple binary men and women. The second sex is oppressed, but it's fighting back. And that also explains why, in my view, gender has become such a battleground for the political struggles of our time. Neo-fascist movement worldwide attack what they call gender ideology, thereby meaning any attempt at dismantling the privileged position of the traditional family and its patriarchal structure. The verbal attacks against the very word gender, which come to include everything from the right of women to work to sex changes, is in my term a reactive attempt to perpetrate the global menocratic rules. There are many tools by which men exercise their privilege globally. A useful, although temporary list include the following: death, the state, capital, and the imaginal. Death, because the second sex is the object of worldwide gendercide. The state, because the sovereign state is an instrument of the sovereign sex. Capital, because its economics exploits women more than men. And the imaginal, because global menocratic imaginary constantly produces and reproduces images that are detrimental and oppressive for women and the other second sexes. So let's go through some of these items. First, death, a worldwide gendercide. There is a war going on globally, and that war is waged against women, two-spirit LGBTQ+ people. Why are there more men than women on the planet, despite the fact that women tend to live longer? Where are all the missing girls gone? The missing girls are not counted in the hundreds or thousands, but in the millions. It is currently estimated that at least 126 million girls are missing from the global population as a consequence of sex-selective abortion, infanticide, and inequalities of care. Although the administration of death via denial of birth is perhaps the most powerful biopolitical tool, gender violence does not stop at birth. At least 69 countries worldwide have national laws criminalizing same-sex relations between consenting adults, while some have laws directly targeting transgender people, leading to an uninterrupted flow of violence against them. Not even homes are safe for the second sex, because as we have learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, as the lockdown wore on, gender violence went exponentially up. Hence the need for a form of feminist philosophy that can gather new global solidarities against patriarchy and menocracy. How to make sure, though, that our feminism that does not end up itself creating a subject for feminism that is one that create new mechanism of subjectification within which the very same feminist movement whereby we seek liberation. How can we make sure the feminism does not turn into just a privilege of the few, a privilege of a few social classes and of a few races around the globe? This is where anarcho-feminism comes in. Anarcho-feminism means feminism without anarchy, that is, feminism without hierarchies, including sexual, racial, economic, and political hierarchies. We cannot fight one form of oppression without fighting all the others at the same time, because all forms of oppression inhabit the same house. That is the belief that some people are superior to others and that this superiority justifies their domination. Sexism, the superiority of men. Racism, the superiority of white people. Classism, the superiority of bourgeois values. All these forms of oppression and discrimination, they inhabit the same conceptual house, what we can call the house of domination. Thus, whereas in some contexts, one needs to focus on certain forms of oppression specifically, we should not forget that all these different threads are part of the same knot, the general knot of domination. So we cannot undo this general knot until all and every thread of this knot will be undone. Second, the sovereign state is an instrument of the sovereign sex. One of the main instruments through which men perpetrate their privilege is the state. Cisgender men and the sovereign sex are the sovereign sex because, like the sovereign state, they do not have to recognize any sex superior to theirs. The state has always been a tool whereby a minority rule over the majority of the people, but few people notice the intrinsically gender dimension of this power. The world is currently divided into 195 sovereign states, and there is hardly any piece of land that is not covered by states. This means that we are forced to live under states' rule, which is tantamount to saying that you are forced to live under men's rule. The percentage of women occupying key state roles globally is indeed so small that it cannot but appear as an exception, the exception to the rule of men. In 156 states examined in 2021, for instance, only 22% of ministers and 26% of parliamentarians were women, while in 81 of the states analyzed, women have never been head of states. And these are the states that accepted providing data about gender balance. A lot of states refuse doing so. This means that it's not an exaggeration to say that when seen globally, it's largely men who decide the rules according to which we live. They decide what is legal and what is illegal, how and when to pay taxes, how and when to inherit property, and so on and so forth. Given that we live under such a global menocracy, are we surprised to learn that women are in average paid 63% of what men get? No, we're not surprised. Does this mean that we should fight to have women president or women CEO? No, it means that we should fight to have no president at all. There cannot be a feminist state because feminism means fight against the oppression of the entire second sex. And the state has always been the tool whereby a minority of people ruled over a vast majority of men. As Chinese Anarcho Feminist Chen pointed out a long time ago, have women imperialists done any good to China? Have they as the Queen of England done any good to the women? No, because when the majority of women are oppressed by both the government men, just adding one more woman who is part of the elite women does not change the condition of the vast majority of powerless women. As she says, if the majority of women do not want to be controlled by men, why would they want to be controlled by a minority or even one or two women? So instead of competing with men for power, Chen concluded, women should strive for overthrowing all sorts of hierarchies. The liberation of women means no more submissive women, but also no more oppressed men on the planet. And she uses the notion of Nanu, which today is translated as gender, but actually the notion of Nanu means all sorts of oppressive relations, including patriarchal relations, but also class exploitation and racial domination. So feminism for Eugene, an anarcho feminist who wrote at the beginning of the 20th century, means the subversion of whole hierarchies. So why anarcho feminism? Because it is the best antidote against the possibility of feminism becoming simply class elitism, or even worse, white privilege. In an epoch when the election of a single woman as president is often presented as liberation for all women, the fundamental message of anarcho-feminists of the past is, in my view, more urgent than ever. Feminism does not mean female corporate power or a single woman president. It means no corporate power and no president. In sum, it means the end of the oppression. In other words, it means liberation for everybody. This anarcho-feminist tradition, which has largely been neglected in philosophy, my discipline, has, in my view, a particular vital contribution to offer today. In particular, one of the central claims of anarcho-feminism has always been to say that freedom is indivisible. And thus, feminism means the liberation of all gender, not just a few of them. Even if one happens to be in a position of privilege, the oppression of the vast majority of others will come back in the form of the house of domination, built on the idea that some people are superior to others. And this is the reason why, conceptually speaking, gender is inseparable from class, from race, from empire, and from all other structure of domination that categorize people according to their being superior in freedom or inferior. Freedom is indivisible. And as Emma Goldman put it, anarchism is the teacher of the unity of life. So anarchism in this sense does not mean absence of order. It does not mean absence of a social life or chaos. That is a misunderstanding of anarchism. Anarchism means searching for a form of spontaneous social order without an order. Third, capital sins. If we take the globe as our framework, the first striking datum to emerge is that people across the globe have not always been doing gender. And moreover, even if they did it on very different terms. It's only with the emergence of European colonialism to a worldwide capitalist system that the rigid gender binarism we're now so accustomed to became hegemonic. This does not mean that sexual differences did not exist before capitalism, nor that global capitalism invented patriarchy from scratches. It simply means that binary gender roles were not as universally accepted as the primary criteria to classify body as they are. Marxist feminists have long since been emphasizing how capitalism needs a gender division of labor because being predicated on the endless expansion of profit, it needs both the extraction of surplus value from wage reproductive labor as well as unpaid reproductive labor, which is still largely performed by women. A lot of the reproductive work performed by women in the global south is excluded from the wage labor system, but is strictly dependent on the use of natural resources and the environment. What appears to multinational corporations as weeds to be eliminated are often gardens that indigenous women cultivated for centuries. As Vandana Shiva and Maria Mies emphasize, whereas the monocultures and industrial farming produce capital for the global market, they are often created at the expense of the destruction of the natural environment that provided indigenous people with the means for subsistence. So what industrialism sees as nature, that is as something that is available to, for grab and for exploitation, is all too often the work of the second sex and the indigenous people. Along with the extraction of labor from the second sex, capitalism also needs to extract free natural resources from the environment and to create a mechanism for regulating the flux of labor. And this is the reason why capitalism has from the very beginning gone hand in hand with colonialism, that is, with the forced extraction of natural resources from occupied lands and the establishment of relationship of domination, whereby the indigenous majority are ruled by a minority of foreign invaders. The division of the world population in different races, predicated upon the signifier of the skin color, black, brown, red, yellow people, is not an a priori of the human mind, but a creation of the capitalist formation that Hannibal Quijano called the coloniality of power. Capitalism needs state boundaries because it needs a mechanism for the regulation of labor force but it also needs racism because it needs to make sure that some bodies are more exploitable than others. By building on Quijano's combination of Marx and Foucault, Maria Lugones has recently put forward the useful concept of a coloniality of gender. If power in a capitalist world is characterized by its coloniality, that is, by the persistence of colonial modes of thinking that persist even when colonialism is formally over, what does it mean to speak about the coloniality of gender? With this term, Maria Lugones emphasized how the binary division men and women and the classification of body according to the racial belonging went together, being exported by Europeans to the very process of colonial expansion that accompanied capitalism. Within the American context, within the territory of Turtle Island, as is known by its indigenous name, gender roles, for instance, were much more flexible and variegated before the advent of European settlers. Different indigenous nations had, for instance, gender terms used to positively recognize two-spirit people, intersex body, and queer subjectivities. Some indigenous nations did not endorse patriarchy. On the contrary, they endorsed form of genocracy, that is, position and social arrangement where women were in a position of power. So genocracy does not mean matriarchy, that women rule. It means that women, gynos, have power as on an equal footing with men. For instance, the Cherokee Nation was, and still is, a genocratic indigenous nation. Other peoples, such as the Yuman, had fluid gender system, as exemplified by their tradition of assigning gender based on dream. So a female who dreamed of weapons would become a male for all the practical purposes of life. All this is not to romanticize the past, the indigenous past of Turtle Island, but just to point to the fact that pre-contact Native American did not endorse patriarchy and did not endorse the compulsory gender binarism that we are now so accustomed and that has been imported in the United States by Christianity. And yet we now live in a world where globally this gender binarism and menocracy is the rule, and where men, in particular white men, are constantly being propped up as the sovereign sex. This is what anarcho-feminists want to context. Fourth, imaginal technologies of the self. The coloniality of gender is not only evident in the extraction of surplus value, labor control to the policing of border, and gender violence. One of the most powerful tools of global menocracy is the production of images that guarantee the internalization of sources of domination. Women's bodies are everywhere the object of a process of disciplining, the purpose of which is not simply to govern bodies, but to instill in us the idea that bodies need to be governed. Images and rituals of beauty and care change a lot from one context to the other, but they are everywhere one of the most powerful tools for the exercise of technologies of the self. This is how docile subjects are created, not only through the imposition of rules from the outside, but through the voluntary and at times even participation in one's own submission. Let's consider, for instance, fashion, in particular Western fashion, and the way in which bodies are portrayed in political communication. Since the 19th century, European men have undergone what psychoanalyst John Carl Flugel called the Great Masculine Renunciation. What does this mean? It means that European men gave up all the colors, laces, and bodily adornment in order to wear that sober color suit and with a tie that has become the default men's attire in Europe. Men have given up their exhibitionism, have given up the desire of being dressed in colorful colors and adornments, but thereby all wearing the same outfit, all wearing the same dark color suit and a tie, visually reinforce a sense of brotherhood. Now, this renunciation has certainly created a vast uniformity in men's clothing. Think, for instance, that from the Industrial Revolution onwards, even wealthy European men who before the Industrial Revolution used to wear very colorful clothes and dresses have all started to wear the same attire, the same sober color two pieces tie. On the contrary, women's fashion has been changing enormously in the last few centuries. Why is that the case? Why have men given up the desire of wearing all those bright colors and the bodily adornments to wear all the same attire? Frugel ascribes this monumental change to the Industrial Revolution and the emergence of commercial ideas that conquered class after class until they became accepted even by the aristocrats of all the more progressive countries. From a change that originally happened in Western Europe, the two-piece suit became the signifier for global masculinity worldwide, that is, for all men who endorse modern European views. According to Frugel, in France, the democratization of clothes reflected ideas of liberté, égalité, fraternité, freedom, equality, and brotherhood born out of the French Revolution. Uniformity in clothing gave a powerful, visible impetus to the doctrine of brotherhood of men. Now wearing the same dark two-piece suit with the tie, men belonging to different classes could feel they all belong to the same group. Now, whereas Frugel only focuses on Western men and French context in particular, and it did not question the global phenomena. It did not question how that Western clothing system, with men all dressing with the same dark color suit and a tie, has become a worldwide phenomena. Indeed, the men who underwent the Great Masculine Renunciation are not men as a universal category. Frugel speaks as men, speaks about French and European men as if they were all the men around the globe. But this is a consequence of his colonial mindset, where he takes one type of man and uses them to speak about men in general. It is true, though, that the Western bourgeois attire, the tie with the suit, has become a signifier for masculinity and modernity worldwide. So, although Frugel's approach is problematic, I think it's an important tool for diagnosing what, with Maria Lugones, we can call the modern colonial gender system. What do I mean? Well, for instance, if we look at the dress code that is mandatory in multinational corporations and institutions such as the World Bank and United Nations, we can see how delegates to these multinational corporations, they all have to wear the same professional attire, and that this business attire is supposed to be for men the same dark color suit with a tie, and for women there's much more variety. But it has to be knee-length dresses and skirts. So you see how the binary is implemented in all as a dress code in all these corporations. There is just one exception. Traditional dress is permitted for delegation in one's home countries. It's considered a professional business dress. But in this way, you see three categories of people. The westernized people, who are all divided between men wearing the suit with a tie and the women wearing a dress, and then those who wear traditional clothes and are therefore set in opposition with the Western modern progressive attire. The great masculine renunciation has become a signifier of the gender binary because it has become a signifier for the ethno-class of bourgeois men. Wearing a sober two-piece suit and tie became a signifier for belonging to a certain global ethno-class. And that is the reason why from London to Nairobi, from Rio de Janeiro to Tokyo, businessmen, politicians, bankers, they all are unified under the same sartorial imaginal order. Adopting the suit and the tie, embracing the outfit of Western European men has indeed become a global signifier for whiteness, not in the sense of biological whiteness, but in the sense of what critical theorist Bolivar Echeverria called ethical and civilizational whiteness. It distinguishes between blancura, biological whiteness, and blanquitude, which is lifestyle, clothing, languages, and technologies of the self, or those who are perceived as white, no matter what the skin color is. We can therefore read the great masculine renunciation as a specific technologies of the self within the modern colonial gender system, and one that is particularly powerful, but is global and imaginal at the same time. While looking at the world politicians or bankers united in the World Bank, we perceive the brotherhood of all westernized men, all united by the same suit and phallic symbol of the tie, and thereby distinguished both from women who are supposed to wear different colors, but also from those who wear traditional clothes, here signifying their position in the global capitalist system. Although this is a visual order that is literally enforced by official dress codes and regulations, is also an imaginal order that is unconsciously reproduced by individual choices and lifestyle. The capitalist mode of production is inseparable from a capitalist mode of reproduction, and thus from the division between productive and reproductive labor. In sum, we can say words have power, but so do images, particularly in our digitalized world. And these images that we see every day on our screen purport the superiority of a certain white ethno-class of European men. 5, another woman is possible. At this point, one may object, why to insist on the concept of feminism and not just call this anarchism? So why to focus on women? If the purpose is to dismantle all type of oppressive hierarchies, should we not also get rid of the gender binary which opposes women to men? I should respond here that when we say women, we're not speaking about an eternal essence or even less about pre-given objects. When I speak about women, I intend the results of a process of becoming, of social relations, which turn certain bodies into what we call women. So bodies in general, and this part of my work is inspired by the notion of Spinoza philosophy, notion of individuality as trans individuality, but something similar can be gathered to the notion of interdependence. Individuality in this philosophy must be understood as the result of processes of becoming that happens at the inter-individual level, at the supra-individual level, and even at the infra-individual level. Think, for instance, how our bodies are the result of the encounter between two bodies, let's say sperm and an ovum, how they are the result of the supra-individual forces, such as the environment we inhabit, but also how they're made up by molecules that we inhale, the air we breathe, or the food we eat, or the polluted water that we have to drink. All this to say that all these mechanisms of association and formation contribute to determine our own individuality. And in this sense, when we speak about women, I think we are speaking about processes of becoming. We're speaking about social relations that determine what a woman or as a concept might be. And this is a notion that, in my view, includes both women who have been assigned female at birth, but also women who have been assigned male at birth. Conclusion, trans-individual ecology. Now, within this philosophy, every being, not only humans, is considered to be endowed with the capacity to affect and being affected. And this is how we all strive to persist on our being. The notion of affecting is important here because ecology is co-affectivity, is being together, is interdependence. This move prevents us from collapsing ecology into an all-encompassing organism. Co-affectivity is co-origination without anarchy, and therefore anarcho-feminism, the philosophy I'm proposing, is eco-affectivity, the power to affect and being affected by every single being. So an anarcho-feminist philosophy also implies a politics of renaturalization, that is, a politics of bringing nature back to the center of our thinking about politics. But this nature that we want to bring to the center of political thinking is not nature with the capital letter, something that is idealized and therefore made exploitable. By nature, what I mean is not simply, I mean all what is part of our own individual being. So not simply what is outside there, the forest, pristine forest, untouched forest, but also the trash, everything that is produced and reproduced within our life. So in this sense, I think that an anarcho-feminist philosophy questions the very hierarchy that has been at the center of Western metaphysics ever since Aristotle philosophy, the hierarchy that has categorized beings according to the hierarchy of man being superior to women, being superior to animal, being superior to plants, being superior to non-life. Within this philosophy, we question all this hierarchy and all these structures of domination. So in this sense, it's an anarcho-feminist philosophy is also a form of ecological thinking. Against the violence perpetrated in the name of this hierarchy of men being superior to women, being superior to animal, being superior to plant, we anarcho-feminists state that all matter is to some extent animate. So there cannot be a liberation of the second sex without a liberation of all and every being that are living upon this planet. So anarcho-feminism also means ecofeminism, and it means the liberation of all, not one less. Either all or none of us living on this planet will be free. Thank you. This is briefly a description of what I mean by anarcho-feminism. We're very happy to respond to questions and comments if there are any.
Thank you, thank you so much, Professor, for a very delighting talk. And I would like to invite Dr. Nupur Patnaik to go for a remark and ask her question. Dr. Nupur.
Thank you, Dr. Rudra, the Executive Director of CARD. So am I clearly audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, a very good morning and good evening. And I would like to thank Professor Chiara, who came all the way from New York virtually. And we are really privileged that ma'am has come here, and she has very well and very clear. She has delivered her talk on anarcho feminism. I think this is very, very important for all of us, because here lots of students from sociology, from gender studies, and many other social sciences, where feminism is a very important in their syllabi. And this particular topic on anarcho feminism, I think we are really clear about the fact that feminism and other things, but anarcho feminism was we have heard about it, but we got a clarity from your talk, ma'am. It was very interesting to listen to you on anarcho feminism, as you have done a lot of research on this particular field. And as anarcho feminism is a different way of feminism, which addresses all kind of subordination. And feminism needs anarchism, that you have said, and you have also mentioned about a lot of tribal people or indigenous people. Basically in India, we come across this subjugation, exploitation, and many other things that usually come across. So feminism is not limited only about this kind of exploitation, but feminism is beyond that, as you have said in anarcho feminism, both capitalistic exploitation and the androcentric politics of domination. So a kind of exploitation, a hierarchy that continues. That is what anarcho feminism calls for, a decolonial and de-imperial position, and for a renewed awareness of the entire community over the planet. So I think this is a very revolutionary vision on feminism, and we are really empowered over here about this particular thing. And we always, not only in other countries, but also in India, we come across a lot of problem with gender discrimination. Usually we have the concept of missing women, as Amartya Sen has quoted, the missing women concept. So India, there are a lot of gender discrimination ideologies that we come across, men, women, as well as ma'am, you talked about the transgender concept. Even transgender people are also exploited in various ways. So this is how you have given a very new outlook to this particular thing, where the struggle against patriarchy that always continues, but there are several things like capitalism, authoritarianism, oppressive philosophy. So there are several things that governs the gender. It is not about only women, but there are several factors that are responsible for a woman's exploitation, or a kind of exploitation in the society that is intersectional, that you have tried to say over here. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your inspiring and enlightening talk over here. I think there are a lot of students over here who are really enlightened by your talk. And I have particularly invited them to come and listen to you, as we have a syllabus in sociology on feminism. So thank you so much, ma'am. It was great listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nupur. Ma'am, there are some questions in chat box. I would like to invite Professor Shubham Das to read the questions for you.
Thank you, Rudra. And first of all, thank you, ma'am, for such a insightful deliberation. And there are few questions from our participant side. SK Imran Kadri has asked that no doubt sovereign society creates division at every context. So what could be the best way to elect leaders? Then is it to reserve certain seats for women or anything else? Also, he added, if you are a person who knows that men and women should have equal rights at every context, and you are in the area where women are brought to know that men are the supremacist and they are born as to serve them, and this is because of they have born as girl, and uncertainly they are getting used to it by the environment, and they are making burden for their upcoming generation. At the point, what should you do to bring reforms as a feminist if the women's did not want change?
Okay. The first thing, how is the best way to elect leaders? So I don't think there is, this is one of the points about anarcho-feminism, I don't think there is one right recipe that works the same everywhere around the globe. There are different struggles. There are different contexts. It depends on who are the people on the ground and what groups are we talking about? What leaders are we talking about? Are we talking about the leaders of states? Are we talking about presidents of multinational corporations? Are we talking about the leaders of the UN? These are one of the points about anarcho-feminism is precisely to say there is not one single solution. So every domination is a tangled knot. There are many different threads, and these threads are different in every context. So in every context, we have to think about forms of electing our speakers in a way that is as close to the principle of freedom as possible. So this obviously changes from one context to the other. If it is a small context, there can be form of direct democracy, for instance, but not in every context this is possible. So that would be my response to the first question. The second question, it's much more complicated. So what to do if women themselves, they don't want change, right? What to do, and this is why I insist on what I call the technologies of the self, right? There's a lot of talk, for instance, in the West about how women, even women who are educated in a position of power, they want to perpetrate traditional patriarchal families, right? And part of the reason for this is because they have internalized ideas about women inferiority that they cannot get rid of, even if they have equal rights with men. That is the problem. We have assisted worldwide to a great feminist revolution. And I really believe that the feminist revolution is the revolution worldwide, along with the colonization, which has had the largest impact on social life, and it's still ongoing. But one of the problems of that revolution, and one of the reasons why I think it's still unfinished, is because although not in every context, but although in some contexts, women have reached a position where they have the same right as men, there is not yet the mentality. So we have too many cultural institutions, we have too many ideas that purport the inferiority of women. And that's why you have this paradox that at times it's women themselves who support patriarchy, right? We need, my response is, we need cultural institutions and that give women a new voice, a new empowerment. Like, for instance, just to give you an example, along with this work on Anarcho Feminism, I've written a work which is called Feminist Mythologies, right? And why? Because at some point I realized that all the mythology that I've inherited from my Christian upbringing, they all depict women in this position of inferiority. Like, you know, for instance, and I've analyzed all the Greek mythology that I've studied in school when I grew up in Italy, the Roman mythology. Women are always inferior to men. Same in the Christian religion. Think about it. The Christian religion is a religion of the sacred Trinity. In Italian, we call it La Trinità. Is the sacred Trinity is the Father, the Child, and then there is the sacred Spirit. Okay. Now, usually you have the Father, the Child, and the Mother, right? When we experience birth, we see always a mother giving birth to a child, right? How can it be that the Christian religion has completely eliminated the motherhood from the sacred Trinity, and it has replaced it with this notion of a sacred spirit, which is a way to eliminate femininity from divinity? So I think that we need a deep change at the cultural level too, because not just our political and juridical system should empower women, but also at the level of culture, we need forms of spirituality that empower women and not that purport their sense of inferiority.
Yes, ma'am. I have some questions for you. That do you think a global new social movement is inevitable to challenge those ideas in religion, culture, and tradition, and to which we can unfollow them, in which patriarchy is deep rooted? Or what need to be done to stop commodification of women, especially in media, as well as in digital media also, in which we have often seen that women's body and beauty are commercialized massively than ever before today. The problem, the most pertinent problem that we have facing today. And another thing I want to add, the misogyny and the commodification of women in media is responsible for the growing menace of crime against women. Somehow it is responsible. So do you think the time has come to introduction of a global sex education and gender sensitization program from the school level to change the mindset of society and the future generation as well?
Yes. Okay, yeah, big question. Yes, I absolutely think it's essential to have a different sort of education and to make women and the second sex in general, including transgender people, aware of the fact that the entire body of culture and the media in particular, they prepare this image of women as commodities. And for me, it's always a paradox that in the West, women speak about, if you look at how women are treated in Africa, this is so brutal. And then you look at the way in which women in the West treat themselves, right? Rituals of beauty in New York for women are crazy. Women are expected to undergo complete depilation. I mean, do you know how painful it is to have all of your hair stripped from your body? Women are expected to wear high heels all the time in order to be feminine. Do you know how painful it is to stand upon high heels for 12 hours a day? So for me, the question is, why do women do all these painful things that are really harmful as well for their bodies? And that's because, women, we see images on the media of women who all look in a certain way, and we all want to look in that way. But the images that are purported, first of all, they reflect the coloniality of power, because there's a certain image of what masculinity is and femininity is, and the Western models play a major role in global media, in giving a certain image of femininity. For instance, in China, there is this procedure for eye surgery to make people's eyes to look more Western, right? In particular, it's women who do this, but men too, but in particular women. Now, this eye surgery to make eyes look more Western has been skyrocketing after the introduction of the new social media, such as Instagram, TikTok, where you can choose from your social media profiles that make your face look more Western, right? Now, you make your face look more Western on social media, and then the next step is to do facial surgery in order to make your face comply with certain image of femininity or masculinity. So the commodification of women's body is a huge issue, and we do need a new program of education to make the second sex more aware that things do not have to be that way, okay? That there are many ways to be feminine and masculine, and that we have to fight back against this homologation to a certain commodified moment. Now, is a global new social movement necessary? It's absolutely necessary, and it's happening. There is a feminist global movement going on at the moment, and it's actually, it changes in certain contexts and in others, but is the movement at the moment. It is because it's fighting against not just patriarchy, it's fighting against capitalism, it's fighting against ecological destruction of our planet. They are at the forefront of many battles of our time. I'm not familiar with what is happening in India, but I'm familiar with what is happening in the territory of Turtle Islands, so North and South America, and what is happening in Europe. There is a global movement, but it needs to grow. It just needs to grow, and also to diversify its strategy.
Yes, ma'am. I have another question. How do you look at the Bullibai or the Sulibai app deals which targeted progressive Muslim women in India in particular by putting their morphed images for auction more recently on New Year's Day? It is this news also highlighted in BBC. Do you think it is the only responsibility of Muslim women to raise voice against such practical ideas, or it is the responsibility of every global citizens to raise questions against such practices which attempted to tarnish women's image?
Right. Yes, I think it's not just upon Muslim women to fight back on this. Actually, I would say it's even more important than Muslim men and then non-Muslim do it, right? There is this deep misunderstanding that it's upon people of color to fight against racism. People of color are the object of racism worldwide. Being anti-racist is for white people. Similarly, feminism is not for women. We need men who become more and more feminist. Feminism is not for women. Women know very well how oppressed they are. We need men to be feminists. So in this case, you know, we need solidarities. So we need Muslim men to have solidarity with Muslim women. We need non-Muslim to have solidarity with Muslim, so that we all can fight the same battles. Because this is the point. Even if you can take, if you are in the position of being a man, first of all, being enchained in a certain man role is not freedom, even for men, right? This stereotype about masculinity and femininity are detrimental, not only for women, but I think they're also detrimental for men. They prevent from authentic relationship and true love to emerge, right? The moment when we are all pushed to conform to this stereotype, we automatically lose something of our own authentic self, right? So my response would be to say, it's not only upon Muslim women to fight back, it's upon everybody to do it. And most of all, let us not forget, it's upon men to become feminist in the same way in which it is upon white people to fight against racism. So let's not get the thing wrongly. So it's upon bourgeois wealthy people to become aware of their class privilege and fight against class privilege. People who are dispossessed, they know what it means to be exploited. They don't need to be taught what it means to be exploited.
Yes, ma'am. My last question is that in Odisha, particular, a local news media, when asked to transgender persons about the reason behind the begging, especially in Bhubaneswar city of Odisha.
Yeah.
So what they replied is really shocking, that they said that even nobody is restraining them to go to schools or go to universities to pursue their education or applying for public jobs. Even the Karnataka is the first state or province in India which also given a reservation to transgender persons. But what they have said, that they are actually facing the social exclusion. So what is your thinking about the LGBT right versus the social exclusion?
So say it again, what is your about the LGBTQ plus right with regard
and the social exclusion they face today, because society is not accepting them. Society is always try to morphing them, try to criticizing them the way they act. Yes.
So as I try to say, when I speak about the second sex, I include not only women, but also transgender people, transgender women and transgender men. Because I do think the situation may be different, but they're also the object. That's not just in India. They are the object of exclusion and exploitation all over the world. And I actually think it is very important for all of us to express solidarities for transgender people. In the it's not just India. In the United States, for instance, if you are a transgender woman of color, you have 47% chances to be jailed at least once in your life. Now, what is so subversive in being transgender person and in being a person of color in the United States. I mean, so subversive that you have more than 40% chances in your lifetime to be jailed at least once. I think, as I said in my talk, I think one of the problems is the state rule. And we have seen it from the beginning. I mean, in modernity, states have started to map the gender of its people in a systematic way, in a way in which it was never the case before. Now, why does the state need to know the gender of its people and to regulate the way in which they perceive themselves? Why does the state need to know all the time if you're married or not married? Why is the gender something that should be a concern of the state? I do think that that's a problem. That's the state is where all this regulation is coming from. And then when we go and we look at who makes this rule, it's most of the time not transgender people, not women, but it's most of the time men who wants to defend their privilege. So we need enlightened people, not only women and transgender people, but most of all, we need men's solidarity. We need men who can voice the rights of women and LGBTQ plus people and who can express solidarity. If we don't get this alliance across all gender within our societies, we will never achieve freedom for the second sex and the LGBTQ plus community. We need global solidarities across the entire society. This is something that I take from Emma Goldman, who's a Lithuanian-born anarcho-feminist thinker, but it's something that also Gandhi says. Vandana Shiva quotes this saying by Gandhi all the time: freedom is indivisible, it's just one. So if we want to live in a free society, we need to express solidarity for those who are most oppressed. And in the society we live in, women, LGBTQ plus people, Two-Spirit, indigenous people are the most oppressed. So we need solidarity with them.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to Director Kat.
Thank you so much, madam. Really enlightening and very praiseworthy kind of talk given by you. It's really very fantastic. I know you are not quite well and little bit upset through your
COVID effect.
Yeah, madam. It's really
global.
Very fantastic.
You see, it's global. Either we are all sick or we're all healthy.
Really fantastic, madam.
Like the virus, I think, I really believe this virus pandemic gives a sense of how interdependent we are. Freedom is only one because life is only one.
Definitely, madam. And you charged all of us to a next level of thinking, to just understanding what Anarcho Feminism and what you talked about, the solidarity in terms of global solidarity. It's one of the major chunk, and I took the last part of your presentation. I gone through maximum number of feminist writers and advocates, like you rightly mentioned about Vandana Shiva, one of the finest mind like you from India, and also Usha Ramanathan, Amita Bhaviskar, Sujata Patel, Simon De Boru, Betty Ferdinand, Gloria Steinem, and Mary Wollstonecraft. All these are very fantastic writers, and in terms of advocates, these ideas of feminism. Madam, I would like to just know from you. I know you are a fantastic mind of our times, as a young and energetic, and you always challenging and persuasive this feminist idea. What wrong with the government if you suddenly believe on our electoral democracy, right, madam? We have 29 of states and a single nation. If I'm not wrong, the notion of nation itself quite challenging. Why the girl child should take privilege as a girl from her childhood in schools, then why a girl took privilege in university level for admissions? Then why a girl took advantage of her life to settle through jobs, through proper channels, through reservations? What is your ideas on it, madam? And what is your suggestions to the government? Why this government always, advocating this gender discrimination and violence, the gender insists in terms of boys and girls, both in terms of sex perspective, boys and girls are equal. Then why we should try to differentiate them from the childhood? In our family, we have a very fantastic family culture here in India, and we should always obey. We had must, the male is the one of the male dominating society. Why we should think like that? Why not the woman should dominate the society as per concern? And then a little bit surprised when people are taking seriously about this anarcho feminism and talked about feminist, the culture, not well-being and well-educated by these feminism activists. What about the activist as concern? In particular, 21st century's modern globes era, when we are living in a digital age, when people are almost now the concept itself very vibrant. You are sitting in New York and we are sitting in a very rural pocket of global south. We are connecting each other and we are interacting each other. We are sharing our ideas and thoughts in terms of next level of thinking. What is your suggestions, madam? Please.
Yeah. It's a lot of questions, very dense. Thank you so much. Let's think through them together. What's wrong with the government? I mean, the basic fact, in most cases, the government is not truly democratic and is most often a tool whereby a minority of people rule over the majority. And the statistics are that in most cases, that minority is also clearly gendered. So globally, I mean, if we look at the states, globally, women out of 150 states that were analyzed in 2021, women occupied only one, in the best cases, 1/5 of the parliamentarians in the different states, 1/5 of the ministers. So they are a tiny minority. Not only government are a tiny minority, they rules over the majority of people, and most of the time they don't have a truly democratic legitimacy, but it's one gender dominating all the others. Now, where is the change coming from? Should it come from inside the government, become more democratic and more egalitarian in terms of gender, or should the change begin with the family? Because in Italy, where I come from, is also a very strong family tradition. And it's also a tradition where men, when girls and boys are differentiated from the very beginning. Where do we begin the change? I think it has to be at both levels. I mean, we have to fight for including more exponents of the second sex in our institutions, and we have to fight inside the families in order to develop a more egalitarian tradition. So I think this is it's really crucial that we act on all the different levels. And I do believe also that, this maybe this connectivity that we're now experiencing, right? The fact that I can connect from New York and have this conversation with you, which I very much value. I wasn't feeling very well yesterday. It's probably COVID. But nevertheless, I wanted to have this conversation because I think it's absolutely pivotal that we learn about each other. I've read a few feminists who come from India, but I don't know enough about the context, and all these conversations are enriching for me, and hopefully, they are also enriching for you, because we learn about each other perspectives, right? We learn about each other's struggle, and we can create solidarities. I mean, I do believe that global solidarities are fundamental in this battle. We are not going to get rid of patriarchy, capitalist exploitation, neo-colonial modes of extractions, unless there are truly global solidarities. Now, this doesn't mean that the action should be local. I mean, thinking, I do think that thinking has to be global, because capitalism is global, and the coloniality of gender is global. It's a global phenomena we're talking about. The earth is dividing into 195 sovereign states, which means that we all have to handle with this formidable power. I mean, we cannot escape state structure. That does, and you may think, well, it has always been like this. No, it has not always been like this. First of all, the modern state system does not predate the Second World War. I mean, it's not that the empires that were there before were better, but they were different, okay? And before empires, in a pre-modern time, there were other types of social arrangements, which I'm not saying that they were ideal, but did not monitor gender in the same systematic way in which contemporary state structure do it. Why does the state need to know my gender? Why does the state need to discipline in such a systematic way how I feel in my gender? What are the gender roles? I mean, think about the global regulation of dress codes in international institutions. Why do all men have to mandatory wear a suit and a tie, which is literally the outfit invented by the Frenchmen after the Industrial Revolution? Why do we all have to conform to the same system? So I do think that it's very important to act locally in the specificities of our community, but we also need global solidarities.
Thank you. Thank you so much, madam, for a very wonderful and very insightful answer. As a student of communication, I little bit worried when I saw the glamour work. And at the same time, when I became a student of history, I little bit shocked to understand the key root of history of feminist. And then when I will become the political scientist, I little bit shocked when the behavior of the political parties about particular the women is concerned, and the domestic violence is very sensitized in these days. Again, when I was a little bit shocked when as a student of development studies, I would like to say the developments happened around the globe, in particular the time of pandemic. What Dr. Nupur Patnaik likely to be asked, ma'am, I have a question. How can this Anarcho Feminism fix COVID lockdown? Then I would little bit surprised, madam, when people around us, particularly in India, if you look the history of medieval time per se, maximum numbers of queens ruled over us before colonial rule imposed on us. And then in ancient period also, lots of queens and ranis, they ruled over us in time to time. Then the feminist culture is missing and lacking so much in India. I think so. It's a submission, not a question, madam. I need and I missed the awareness campaign. If you gone through the modern India's history of India, you quite little bit familiar with Mirabai and this Madam Pandita and Savitribai Phule what about these women? They are almost taking seriously and getting into the light of girl child education to promote and to fight against the British Raj. In what causes we need to collaborate these ideas as a policy thinker? I would also like to request you, madam, give some light on it. What kind of policy lacking to protest the domestic violence as concerned, the feminist culture is concerned, and the culture that you rightly mentioned about the culture. The culture is very much essential for any community as concerned. If you look seriously and read about the Habermas theory and also the theory of Marx, the labor and the owners concept, how are you missing the labor? The labor is not always the male. Labor also be a female in many decades, many centuries, but we have to highlight. We don't want to ignore them. And you basically pointed in your presentation about indigenous culture. In your first sentence, you tribute and pay homage to them, the indigenous priority. Today, when we are talking about the global solidarity as concerned, we must sensitize these issues first. The indigenous communities' culture should be preserved as the first and foremost duty of all of us. We have to do it by any means or anyhow, because if the culture is preserved, then everything should be preserved in a right manner, in a right direction. Thank you so much, madam, and give some suggestions and light on it, madam. And madam, sorry, really sorry, 1 second, sorry, I know you are not quite well and I am troubling you again and again. I'm really sorry, madam.
It's okay. I think I get this one thing that I do want to say in response to your remark. I do think it is absolutely important to support and be in solidarity with indigenous struggles because they have a culture. I'm using here indigenous in the sense of those who are born there. Those who are born there, they know how to preserve the environment. They know how the environment works. So what from the perspective of capital accumulation may appear just as weeds to be exterminated, from the perspective of indigenous cultures, and in particular indigenous women who have been the cultivators of biodiversity on the planet, our gardens, our ecosystems that are able to generate, regenerate themselves, and also to nourish people on the ground. So I think it is important to express solidarities for indigenous struggles, but it's also important to initiate and changes in culture, because patriarchal culture has very, very deep roots, and we need alternative, we need to gather all the resources that we can, both from the traditions and from global solidarity around the globe, in order to develop a different culture. Because for example, the commodification that we see now on medias and social medias is not good for anybody. It fuels domestic violence. Gender violence is on the rise everywhere. And actually the COVID-19, the lockdown, has been a disaster. It's been a disaster because when people are, you can see here how much, right there is in the anarcho-feminist idea that life is unity. Life is together. You cannot separate it. When people are forced into their homes, the natural energy are retroverted and they become violence. The homes are not safe for the second sex. It's not that, you want to avoid gender violence, just stay at home, don't go out. No, most of the gender violence is actually domestic violence. So there is something in the models of the family relationship that we need to change. We need to change this sense of entitlement that leads some people to exercise, some men in particular, to exercise their violence on women and LGBTQ plus bodies. But we can't do this without a combination of local resources and global horizons.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. And with this note, I will stop here. And before I would like to invite Rudranaran Das for a formal vote of thanks. I would self and entire the team card and the audiences are really always to be very kind and honest with you, madam. And looking forward for future engagements. Get well soon. And namaste from India, madam.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Zena, can I go for?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Zena. I would like to thank everyone to help me putting this conference together. First of all, my big thanks to our speaker, Professor Chiara. And thank you very much for your contributions and time. Definitely with a very important and sensitive period of time, your lecture will be strengthen the women of our society, and definitely the entire society will be enlightened with your deliverance today. Thank you so much for being with us. I have to acknowledge the institutional contributions here, in particular the Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, and Ravenshaw University for their institutional support. And my special thanks to our patrons, Professor Sanjay Nayak, Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Professor Sarath Kumar Palita, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha, and Professor Mahadev Joyswal, Director, Indian Institute of Management, and the convener of this conference, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda and Charudat Panigrahiji, for their motivation and support to conducting such type of intellectual gathering worldwide. A special mention to Dr. Vikram Kesari Jena, the Director, Center for Adivasi Research and Development, and Dr. Nupur Patnaik, Dr. Shubham Das, for helping me to carry forward the session. And special thanks to the entire team of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, all advisors, members, Professor Srinivasulu, NS, Dr. Sudarshan Misra, Professor Loknath Misra, Professor DC Das, Professor Sabarn Bag, Dr. Nupur Patnaik, Dr. Amulya Acharya, Shubham Das, Chinmay Sahu, Dr. Kamal Mohanty, Dr. Samuel Lima, Dr. Neha Sharma, Dr. Preeti Surranjan, for their unflinching support and coordination. Our heartfelt thanks to all academicians, research scholars and students, and our dear participants from Facebook and YouTube who are watching us live in Facebook. With these warm words and a kind message, we have to be moved to end today's session. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Professor Chiara, and get well soon.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.